If you go through this list, you will find many different ways that you have something to contribute to the online world, regardless of your comfort with technology or your comfort level with all of this. Now, some of these things on this list you may not have ever even heard of, and that's okay. You can do a quick search. Go to google.com or your favorite search engine, type one of these phrases in, and you'll find some really interesting stuff. So the personal learning network and the personal teaching network. What are some ways that we can start to cultivate those and that sense of community and connectivity and collaboration as we have our interactions with our learners when we're not in the same place with one another? Well, I'm going to share 7 very simple kinds of tips or technologies. They're not necessarily simple in that you'll learn to use them in 3 or 4 minutes. Some of them you might have to take an hour or 2 to sit down and figure out. As I go through, almost every one of the next slides has a link. And many of them are links to YouTube or video tutorials on how to use the different tools. You'll also find that in some of these, I actually have links to articles that I've written on how to promote good teaching and learning with the use of these tools. So I'm going to introduce them, but the learning doesn't have to stop after my presentation. You're free to take this and download it and use it to explore these topics well beyond our little hour together. So the first one is a community that you may or may not have heard of. You can create a Google Plus account. You can if you just Google Plus, one of the first links that you'll find is how to create a how to join Google Plus. Within Google Plus, there are these things called communities. Yeah, and let's see here. I'll get my little green arrow. See if I can get it to work. So you'll notice in the top left, there's that green arrow pointing at communities. And this is a community where people can post. You'll notice on the left-hand side, if I kind of drag this arrow down, these are different discussions that we're having. I'm leading an open course that anyone can take for free. There's no credit associated. And we're exploring things like peer assessment and authentic assessment, different ways of getting about feedback and assessment other than traditional letter grades or in addition to traditional letter grades. This is a community where people can type their questions and they can share ideas. They can click video and automatically record a video and talk to one another. And so I teach online at universities, and I use their learning management system. But I often create a Google community. You can make these private or public. And I use it because it has some really neat features. You can share links and photos and videos. You'll notice up here, type text, photos, links, or video. It's a tool that gives you some really neat possibilities for building community and collaboration. It also works really well when you want to have a conversation with a group of learners, but you want to invite some outsiders in who aren't part of your school. And it's pretty easy for them to join. You can make them public or private, as I mentioned before. So that's one, Google+, great tool. A second one then is Twitter. Now some people they hear Twitter and they think this is pointless. If you want to learn about what Twitter is and how to get started, there's a link to a video at the bottom of my slide. Again, you can download using the link in the chat area, download the presentation and check it out. Twitter seems really odd at first. It's a kind of service called microblogging. Basically, you can type statements of 140 characters or less. And you'll notice here on my Twitter homepage that I have made 1,882 tweets, meaning 1,882 statements of 140 characters or less, that I am following 890 people. So by following them, that means that when they make a statement, it shows up over here for me, and I can follow what they're thinking and what they're doing. And then here, it shows that 943 people are following me. And so this is a network. This number, the people who I'm following, represent, in essence, my personal learning network. And this over here represents, in part, my personal teaching network. People who connect with me and learn from me, and I, in return, learn from them. Now, what could you possibly do meaningful in 140 characters or less? Well, sometimes people share that they're participating in a conference and they share little quotes and statements. And it does challenge us to be a little more concise. It's sort of bumper sticker philosophy, I guess, in some ways. But the other thing that you can do is that you can link to resources that you find valuable. So you'll notice over here, there are links to websites that people find useful. And so you can share resources with one another, and that's the power of Twitter, is that people share ideas. I can check Twitter for 15 minutes a day and learn about 10 things that I've never heard of before. I don't have the time to explore all of them, but maybe I choose to explore 2 of them. And so I can build into my day a 30-minute professional development time by just reviewing my Twitter feed, seeing what people are doing and thinking and learning. I find the people that are interesting to me, that resonate with my own research interests. I follow them and I learn from them. And sometimes I connect with them. I have built really strong relationships that started on Twitter, turned into phone calls, turned into coffee, coffee at a face-to-face coffee shop or something like that. Very powerful stuff. And so Twitter is one I would encourage you to consider. There are many teachers, and I actually use Twitter with my students. You can create something called a hashtag in Twitter. So when you type that 140-character statement, down below you'll see I have the green arrow pointing on, it's a number sign and then a word. Then anyone can actually search. They can go up here and they can type that number sign and that phrase. And then anyone who's typed a tweet or has tweeted with that hashtag in it, that will show up in this list right down here. And so I can actually find out everything that people are talking about regarding that one topic. So for example, if you like educational technology, there's a hashtag of EdTech. And I can follow that and find out all the really neat, interesting things that are happening. So when I teach a class, sometimes, let's say I'm teaching the class, and the class is called EDG842. I might use the hashtag EDG842, and I tell my students to type messages and use that tag, and we can follow one another, and we can connect. There are other interesting ways of doing it, too. I've had some very wonderful learning experiences by just simply adding Twitter to the conversation, and students share ideas, and then all of a sudden people from outside the class join in as well. It can be a very powerful tool. A third one would be Google Hangouts. So Google Hangouts, I have some links below that teach you how to do it. This is a free tool. It does part of what we're doing in this Adobe Connect, this live session, but you can do it, you can have up to 10 people in a room at the same time, and you can have video, you can have just audio. You see the different people who are participating. The moment someone talks, their image becomes the big one up here. They can type text messages, you can share your screen, you can do a lot of what we're doing here. But it's a very quick, easy way for people to get together. I actually have my students in my online courses. They will meet, and I will require them to meet in groups of 3 to 5, and they will workshop their papers and their projects together. One will share, the others will be really curious, give them feedback, ask them questions, and they can schedule it when in time that works best for them. The other thing is the on-air part. There is a feature in Google Hangouts where you can click to record it, and it automatically records the whole session and it streams it out to YouTube. You can make that video private, or what's called unlisted, so that only people who can see the video are those who have the link to it, or you can make it completely public as well. And so I can have my learners have a discussion and record it and send it to me afterward so that I can see what they talked about. It has some neat possibilities for online learning. Another one I won't talk about much is social bookmarking. But many of you have probably used bookmarks. When you're browsing the web, you find a website that you like. You might go in your browser and you might click Add Bookmark or Save to Favorites. Well, Diigo is one of many services, and again, I have a link down here to show you how to use it if it interests you, where you can actually save all of your bookmarks out on the web. And you can actually create a group, so that you can have a group of 10 students who are all finding resources and sharing them to the same group, and they all have access to it. So you can actually have team research where they all go out and find different sources and share them in the same group. Or you can create what's called a list, where you maybe find all of the links, but you want to organize them by topics. So maybe you have one topic that's about Eastern medicine, and you might have a list of 40 sites that are under your list called Eastern Medicine. And you can share that list and make it private or public, and you can share it with your students and say, when you do your work, I'd like you to check out these sources. A fifth one is blogging. And I have some videos down below that talk about blogging and how you can blog and uses of it. EduBlog is a great service for creating your first blog. A blog is simply short for web blog, and it's a way that you can write articles. You can write articles and create web pages with no technical knowledge. And the newest article always shows up first. So, for example, if you look over here, this is actually my blog, etail.org. You're welcome to check it out. I've written about 300 articles in the last year. I'm a little more aggressive than many people. And you'll notice that up here it has the date of when I wrote it. So you can actually have students create blogs, and they can do journals. And EduBlog allows you to make it private, available only to groups in your class. So one could write an article, and then others can actually comment on it. So there's a way they can click a little comment button. Right here it says no comment, but they could click comment, and they could share and give each other feedback. Oh, good. There's a question from Tanya. I will definitely get to the course learning outcomes piece in a moment here. Number 6 is the collective essay. So the collective essay is using a tool called Google Docs. If you've never heard of it, I have some tools down here below. Think of Google Docs as a Microsoft Word or an Office Suite, but it's online. And here's the part that many people don't realize, is that you can actually work on the same doc. You can go up here to share it with someone's email address, and they can come in and they can actually work on the same document. I use this to have students work on what's called collective essays. So you give a group of people, and their job is to collectively, together, write an essay. Now, down here on the side, it says anonymous because they're not logged in. But I can actually track everything that every student added to the document and what they changed. So I can see that everyone is contributing meaningfully to it. This, for example, is an instance, and this will relate to what Tanya mentioned. So Tanya asked about how do you align it with outcomes. Well, one of my outcomes was about, in this particular class, it was about theories of learning and design. This one was about different aspects of brain research and how it can impact teaching and learning. In class, we collectively wrote a 13-chapter book. It was about 200 pages long, and it was a group of 13 students. And we wrote it over the course of 8 weeks in Google Docs. And they contributed. So what I did is I had them each write these collective chapters, and I assigned different students the role of editor, writer, researcher, and they all had to contribute and write these things. Now, I did have an individual assessment to check their individual knowledge and learning separate from this. But this was directly connected to one of the learning outcomes throughout the class. The same thing would happen with Google+, where I might have them discussing topics that relate to one of the learning outcomes. One of the flaws in a lot of courses is that we don't give them enough practice and formative feedback. The first time they get feedback is when they get a grade. But the point of formative feedback is that they get practice to refine their knowledge and skill before they get a grade. And that's where a lot of these tools that I'm mentioning come in, is that you can use them to help people get a lot of that feedback and practice. Without feedback, we do not learn. And so the last one that I'll share with you is not a technology, but it's an approach. I would argue that one of the seventh thing that we can do, using the kinds of tools that I just mentioned, is we can encourage students to think and be a digital learning community. That means that we create spaces like Google+, or maybe you have discussion areas within your courses, or there are many other tools. We can have video and audio contributions. But students commit to communicating early and often. So maybe you organize things by week or whatever, and if you do that, you encourage them to take responsibility, invest in the lives of others, communicate early and often. The other thing I tell my students is I invite them to be really curious of one another. And when I invite them to do that, what they end up doing is they ask as many questions as they share statements. And when they start asking questions, they sharpen one another, they challenge one another to kind of refine their ideas and their thoughts. To look for and reach out to specific individuals. So I encourage students to invest in the lives of students within their class and find someone who has something in common and to reach out even in a private email and to spend some time and maybe find a way to collaborate with them on a project or so forth. I encourage my students to also self-organize student activities so that it doesn't always have to be me, the teacher, who is creating a Google Hangout. I simply invite them, I introduce them to the tools, and maybe I do have a requirement that they have at least 2 or 3 Google Hangouts and record them through a given class, or maybe it's less formal. But I invite them to take some responsibility, and what that does is it helps them to grow and embrace that concept of self-directed learning that's so critical to success and also to just to a sense of control of their lives. And this is a growing trend. It's the concept of self-blended learning. So learning is not just about what the teacher designs for me. It's the kinds of experiences that I personally design in order to get the most out of the learning experience. So, for example, it's common that students in your classes right now might already be using some of these tools. They get an assignment from you, and so they go to Twitter and they tweet to say, does anyone have a good source for this? And they ask, and they get ideas, and then they bring that back to the class. So encourage students and invite them to do some of that self-organizing. Encourage them to be encouraging and affirming one another in the online world. We do that face-to-face, but in the absence of the visuals and those nonverbals, it's really critical that we learn to be affirming in our words and that we use our words carefully and we practice and talk intentionally about what kinds of statements encourage and affirm and what kinds discourage and distract. And then encourage people to also, once you've created that encouraging environment, to challenge and question one another in these kinds of online environments that I mentioned before, and then to build upon each other's ideas. So if we were to cultivate an online space that uses many different tools like this, and they're jumping from tool to tool, and they're engaging in these kinds of activities, I guarantee you that 3 things will happen in one way or another. One, you will see for many learners, increased learning, that they will get more practice and more feedback on the concepts that they're exploring in your course, and that they'll learn more. 2, they're likely to have increased engagement. In other words, they're going to be a little more drawn to this. They're going to have a greater sense of community, and with that comes a greater sense of responsibility to invest in that community. And they'll be more engaged in the learning experience, most likely. And then the third one is that they're going to have the access, or you're actually going to make increased access and opportunity a possibility for your learners. So you're going to give them increased access and opportunity to great learning experiences, but you're also going to invite other people outside of your class into some of those experiences so that you share the wealth and others benefit from what you're doing.